They say I have a perfect smile. No braces, no whitening, no dental work I can remember. Just perfect teeth. The only problem is, they're not mine. Welcome to a different kind of bedtime story. Tonight, you'll follow one man's quiet descent into a mystery buried just behind his own lips, where memory fades, teeth shift, and identity is something you can wear like a mask. This is a slow-burn horror, designed for sleep. Dim the lights, put your phone on silent, and whatever you do, try not to smile. My teeth are perfect. Every dentist I've ever seen has said perfect alignment, no cavities, not even any staining. They sit in my mouth like a showroom display, glossy and white and unnaturally symmetrical. But here's the thing. I never had braces, never whitened them, never flossed religiously or drank only water or chewed xylitol gum after every meal. As a child, I chipped a front tooth on a steel jungle gym, and yet, when I look in the mirror today, my smile looks nothing like the one I grew up with. Still, I never questioned it. Not really. I chalked it up to memory playing tricks or dental work I forgot. Maybe I had some kind of cosmetic procedure in my early 20s and blocked it out. That wouldn't be the strangest thing I've repressed. But lately something's been wrong. Not painful, just wrong. And I can't shake the feeling that these teeth, these perfect polished teeth, don't belong to me. I live alone in a small second-floor apartment above a pharmacy. The walls are yellowed from decades of cigarette smoke. No amount of primer can cover. Outside my kitchen window is a narrow fire escape, a rusted steel staircase that trembles when pigeons land on it. I wake up most mornings around 6, make tea, brush my teeth. I use a soft bristle brush and mint-flavoured paste. No fluoride. Not since the headache started. I watch myself in the mirror the same way someone might examine a stranger on a train. That's what it feels like sometimes. Like the man staring back at me isn't me, but someone wearing a too-perfect mask made of bone and enamel. My job's ordinary enough. I manage inventory at a plastics manufacturing company. Barrels of resin, temperature logs, safety goggles and lost keys. I answer to a woman named Karen who drinks Red Bull before 9 a.m. and wears Crocs with socks. She calls me Teeth Guy because I smile when I'm uncomfortable, which is often. I take lunch at my desk. I don't really chew. I'm not sure why. I tend to cut things into tiny bites and let them dissolve on my tongue. I've started avoiding apples too. Not because I dislike them, but because I'm afraid of what might come loose if I bit down. The dentist's name was Dr. Ellen Merrow. I found her through a flyer on my car windshield, printed on glossy cardstock, black background, silver font. It didn't have a business address, just a phone number, a name, and the slogan, "Every smile tells a story. Let yours be beautiful." I wasn't planning on going, but the next morning I woke with blood in my mouth. Not a lot, just enough to taste rust. When I spit into the sink, there were pinkish threads curled around the drain. I checked my gums, my tongue. Everything looked fine. Still, something told me to call. She answered on the first ring. Merrow Dental. Her voice was smooth and calm, like a teacher at the end of a long day. I hesitated. "Hi, I think I found your flyer." There was a pause. Then, "Yes, I was hoping you would." Dr. Merrow's office was down in the warehouse district, tucked between an old meatpacking plant and an abandoned textile mill. There was no signage, just a brass door with a frosted glass panel etched with the words Merrow Dental, by appointment only. Inside, it was colder than it should have been. The waiting room was immaculate. White tile floor, old leather chairs, a bubbling fish tank humming softly in the corner. No receptionist, no ticking clock, just the low whir of fluorescent lights and the faint smell of bleach and lavender. I waited less than a minute before the door creaked open. She was tall, not unusually so, but in that way some people carry themselves like their bones are longer than yours. Her hair was silvery blonde, tied back in a perfect chignon, her skin pale as chalk. She wore a high-collared coat that buttoned at the throat. "You must be Evan," she said. I nodded. She smiled. Her teeth were not perfect. They were slightly uneven, a little crooked, real, human. "I've been expecting you." I don't remember much of the examination. There was a soft humming noise, classical music maybe. I lay back in the chair. It adjusted itself with a mechanical sigh. Her hands were warm and dry. She didn't wear gloves. She murmured things like, "Interesting," and "There it is," and once, "No, not this one, not yet." She didn't ask questions, didn't offer to clean or polish or check for decay. Instead, she leaned very close, so close I could feel her breath on my lips. "These teeth," she whispered, "they don't belong here." My jaw went slack. I know," I said. She pulled back. Her eyes were pale grey, almost translucent. "You've been waking with the taste of metal, haven't you? Not always blood, just the memory of it." I blinked. She nodded, more to herself than to me. "They're getting restless." When I left her office, the sun was already setting. I don't remember paying. I don't remember leaving the chair. I just remember walking back to my car and seeing, out of the corner of my eye, the silhouette of someone standing in the window of the old textile mill next door. Their jaw was open wide, unnaturally wide, and even from a distance I could see the teeth gleaming, too white, stacked like shark rows inside the gaping black of their mouth. I blinked. They were gone. That night I dreamed of chewing. Not eating. Just chewing. I was grinding something hard between my molars, ivory maybe, or bone. I couldn't stop. My jaw ached, but the rhythm continued. Crunch, grind, crunch, over and over, until my mouth filled with dust and tiny splinters. I woke up with a sharp pain behind my front teeth. In the mirror, there was nothing wrong. My smile was still perfect, but something had changed. The gums above my canines were sore to the touch, and I swear, for just a moment, they looked pushed forward, like something underneath was preparing to erupt. Like I had more teeth than I should. Tomorrow, I have a follow-up appointment with Dr. Merrow. She said we'd begin the extraction process, but wouldn't explain what that meant. All I know is this. My teeth are perfect, but none of them are mine. And I think whoever they belong to wants them back. Chapter 2. The Extraction Process. The next morning, I called in sick to work. I told Karen I had a dentist appointment and might be out for a couple days. She didn't ask questions, just grunted and told me to log the missed hours in the portal. I spent the rest of the morning pacing my apartment in my socks, brushing my teeth more times than necessary, checking for blood, for cracks, for anything out of place. Nothing was, except for the pain. It wasn't sharp, more like pressure. Deep in my gums, mostly behind the front row, like something big was lodged there, too large for the space it was given, trying to push its way forward. At noon, I took the subway to the warehouse district. I didn't want to drive. I wanted time to think, but the entire ride I kept my jaw clenched and my tongue pressed behind my teeth, terrified that if I relaxed, something might shift. When I reached the building, the brass door was already open. Dr. Merrow didn't greet me in the waiting room this time. The moment I stepped inside, the same low, sterile scent hit me, lavender and something faintly chemical, like developing fluid. The chair was reclined, ready for me, the lights already on. I walked in, cautiously, like I'd been invited to sit at someone's deathbed. "Good," said her voice from somewhere behind me. "You came." She stepped into view wearing the same high-collared coat. No scrubs, no lab coat, no mask. Just the same bone-coloured buttons running up to her neck. "Sit down," she said. "Let's begin." I hesitated before sitting. "Can I ask something first?" Her head tilted slightly. "Of course. What exactly do you mean by extraction?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "It's not what you're thinking. We won't be pulling anything, at least not yet. What we're doing is more diagnostic than surgical." I stared. She sighed as if explaining something tedious. "Think of it like a scan, a way of identifying which teeth still belong to you and which don't." I swallowed. My mouth felt dry. "You mean some of these teeth are mine?" She nodded. "A few, not many, but they're still yours, and they're still fighting." Fighting, she gestured to the chair. I sat, heart pounding. "I need you to open your mouth and keep your hands on your lap," she said. "There may be some discomfort and some audio distortion." "Audio what?" But she was already reaching into a drawer. The tool she retrieved looked like a small tuning fork, connected to a short wand with a black cord that disappeared into the wall. She flicked it once and it began to hum, a low, vibrating pitch, not quite audible so much as felt in the teeth. I immediately flinched. The vibration didn't hurt, but it triggered something deep, a grinding memory inside the root of me. I felt like I might gag or scream. She leaned in and rested the wand against one of my upper molars. Breathe through it, she murmured. Let them show themselves. I didn't know what she meant until it started happening. There was a sound, a soft click-click deep in my head, not from my jaw, not from the tool, from the tooth. I swear to you, it moved, just slightly, a fraction of a millimetre, but enough that I felt it dislodge from whatever socket it had claimed. Then another tooth, a canine this time. Click, shift, a pressure change in my skull, like cabin air leaking. She pulled the tool away. The hum stopped. There, she said quietly. 5. 5 what? She looked down at her chart. Foreign. I sat upright, suddenly cold. I don't understand. Foreign as in what? Implants? Donor teeth? Her eyes didn't leave the chart. They weren't implanted, not in the medical sense. They were acquired. How? She was quiet for a long time. Then, calmly, some people are born without the anchor tissue to support full adult dentition. Sometimes their bodies borrow. Sometimes that borrowing is unconscious, a kind of soft parasitism. I stared at her. Are you saying what, absorbed someone's teeth? No, she said softly. I'm saying someone's teeth absorbed you. I left her office with a dull ache behind my sinuses and a small envelope in my jacket pocket. Inside were 5 X-rays, printed on a translucent film I didn't have a light box to examine. She'd marked each of the 5 foreign teeth with a red pen. On the back of each printout, she'd written a date. Each date corresponded to something. One was the day I fell off my bike at age 9 and split my chin. One was the day of my grandmother's funeral. Another was the night I had food poisoning so bad I passed out in the bathtub. And one was the night I took too much NyQuil and woke up in the hallway, standing in the dark, with no memory of how I got there. I don't know what any of it means yet. But I do know this. They're not just teeth. They're entries, points of access, and they don't want to come out, not without a fight. That night, I found something in my bathroom sink. It was a small splinter, bone white, about 1/2 inch long. I thought it was a tooth fragment, maybe something I chipped. But when I pressed it between my fingers, it flexed slightly. It wasn't enamel. It was nail, human fingernail, curved inward like it had grown around something. I looked at my own hands, all intact. So where did it come from? I didn't sleep that night, not really. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the radiator ticking, the pipes groaning, the occasional footstep from the apartment above me. And underneath all that, a quiet, persistent clicking, like teeth, tapping, counting, practicing. There's a kind of fear that doesn't sprint. It waits. It's the fear that sets in after the adrenaline drains, once the shadows return to their proper corners, but the wrongness lingers. That was how I felt the next day. Not panicked, not trembling, just listening, for something I couldn't name. I didn't go to work again. I couldn't. Instead, I spent the morning at the kitchen table, X-rays spread across the surface like tarot cards. The red-marked teeth stared back at me from ghostly outlines. I held one up to the light, August 11th, 2009, and tried to remember anything about that date. It wasn't just the day I fainted. It was the night after a house party in college. I'd been drinking, yes, but I remember that feeling before I passed out. My gums had ached. I kept running my tongue along the back of my teeth like something was loose. I thought I'd bitten a bottle cap. I'd told a girl that night, Jenna or Gina, something with a J, that it felt like someone else was inside my mouth. She laughed. I did too. But now, I wanted a second opinion, a real one. So I made an appointment with a traditional dentist, Dr. Claire Wexler. Her office was on the north side, across from a strip mall and a drive-through sushi place. Her receptionist had to squeeze me in, but when I said I had sudden nerve pain and some mobility in a molar, she got me a slot the same afternoon. Wexler was normal. Clean office, fluorescent lights, disposable gloves. She ran a routine checkup, did a cleaning, took 2 digital X-rays. I watched her face while she scrolled through the results. Good news, she said. Your teeth look fantastic. No movement, no decay, no periodontal issues. I frowned. What about the pain? The clicking? It feels like they're shifting. She smiled like I was describing a dream. That's pretty common. Could be jaw tension, bruxism, maybe stress. A lot of patients clench without realizing it. Have you been under any pressure lately? Not exactly. Grinding your teeth in your sleep? No. Have you had any facial trauma recently? No. She leaned back. Well, from what I'm seeing, your teeth are almost too perfect. Natural symmetry like that is rare. I sat there for a second. The way she said it, too perfect, echoed something Dr. Merrow had said. I opened my mouth to ask a follow-up, but she cut in. Actually, she clicked the mouse and enlarged one of the X-rays. There is something minor. She tapped the screen. That premolar, right bicuspid, looks like it has a double root. I squinted. Is that bad? No, just uncommon. Usually a person has one or two double-rooted teeth, typically molars. But yours, she zoomed again, you've got 6, all different teeth. Not symmetrical either. One of them looks... Looks what? She paused, then smiled again, this time just a shade too fast. Just an odd shape, nothing to worry about. I'll note it in your chart. I didn't press. I didn't want to. Because in her silence I heard what she didn't want to say. That shape wasn't just odd. It didn't belong. That night I flossed for the first time in weeks. I stood in front of the mirror and worked methodically from left to right, careful not to tug or irritate anything. When I reached the right bicuspid, the one with the double root, I felt something catch, a resistance, not food, not plaque. It was something dry. I pulled the floss forward. A short, curled black hair came out between my teeth. Not mine. Too coarse, too thick, too long. I dropped the floss in the sink and stared at my reflection. Something about my smile looked different. It wasn't the teeth. It was the gums. They'd pulled back slightly, exposing just a sliver more of the root. And the roots were dark. Not yellow, not stained, but dark, like old wood soaked in ash. I couldn't sleep again. I tried, but I kept tasting something bitter in the back of my mouth. Not blood, not rot. Something chemical, like antiseptic and cold copper. At 2:12 a.m. my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I didn't answer. A voicemail arrived 30 seconds later. The message was only 4 seconds long. In the background, I heard dental instruments clinking, metal tapping porcelain, then a sound like suction, then a voice, a child's voice. He whispered, they weren't his to begin with. In the morning I returned to Merrow Dental. The brass door was locked. No answer when I knocked. I stepped back to look at the window, but the frosted glass was blacked out. No light behind it, no signage, no fish tank. It looked like the space had never been a business at all. I walked around the side of the building, hoping to find another entrance. Instead, I found a steel service door with a combination lock and an old logo stamped on the rusted siding. Holloway Correctional Dental, closed 1998. I pulled out my phone. No record of Merrow Dental in any online listing. No practice registered under her name. It was like she'd vanished. That night, I found something under my pillow. It wasn't money. It wasn't a note. It was a second black hair, curled, threaded with what looked like grey root, and it was still warm. Chapter 4. The Girl with the Paper Cup. The hair under my pillow should have been the thing that pushed me over the edge, but it wasn't. What finally made me question my sanity, really, truly question it, was the feeling I had at the coffee shop the next morning. It was subtle. A shift, a flicker in the room's rhythm, like a needle jumping on a record. I was stirring a packet of sugar into my drink when I realized I could feel every tooth in my mouth. Not the way you feel your arm or your hand, but in high resolution. Like my body had mapped them individually and sent their weight, their presence into my awareness. I could feel them shifting when I blinked. When I turned my head, I wasn't moving them, but they responded. They were listening. I took my drink and sat outside, hoping the air would ground me. Across the street, a woman in scrubs handed a paper cup to a man slumped on the sidewalk. There was a moment between them, some kind of shared understanding I couldn't read. Then she left, and he took a long sip, staring across the road. At me. No, not at me. At my mouth. He stood slowly and shuffled across the crosswalk, still carrying the cup, nearly empty. His pants were threadbare, shoes worn smooth at the soles, but his eyes, green bloodshot, were lucid, intentional. He stopped a few feet from my table. You don't know what they cost, do you? I blinked. What? He gestured vaguely to my face. Them! You're walking around like they were free. I felt my stomach turn. I don't know what you're talking about. He nodded, solemn. Exactly. Then he reached into the paper cup and pulled something out. I flinched, but it wasn't a weapon. It was a tooth. Human, yellowed, flat, a molar probably. He held it out, resting in his open palm. They keep them. You don't think they do, but they do. Who does? He didn't answer. He just walked away. At home, I dug through the trash. I hadn't emptied the bathroom bin yet. The floss was still there, the black hair tangled around it. I pulled it out with tweezers and laid it on the counter, measured it against one of my own. It was twice as thick, coarser, straight as fishing wire. I checked my scalp for shedding. Nothing. No bald spots, no loose strands. Then I pulled out the x-rays again. I looked at the first one. Date, March 7, 2007. I'd had mono that year. High school. Weeks in bed. One night I woke to find blood on my pillow. I assumed it was from my nose. What if it wasn't? I leaned closer to the x-ray. The tooth in red wasn't one I recognized. It looked old. The root was warped, bulbous, like it belonged to someone who'd clenched their jaw for years. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, opened my mouth, and there it was. The same tooth. Front right molar. Perfect, gleaming, completely out of place. That night, I dug out a shoebox I hadn't opened in years. Inside were things from high school, ticket stubs, birthday cards, photos I couldn't bear to throw away but didn't want to display. At the very bottom was something I'd forgotten I kept. A small plastic retainer case. It had belonged to a girl named Mallory. We'd dated briefly when I was 16. She was shy, bookish, one of those people you didn't notice until she started speaking, and then you couldn't stop listening. She had terrible teeth, crooked with a pronounced overbite. She hated them. Hid her smile behind her hands, but she was the first person I ever kissed. She gave me the case during our last week together. Said it was stupid, but she wanted me to remember her smile before it disappeared. Inside were 2 clear plastic trays, retainers. The top tray had tiny ridges molded around every imperfection. The bottom was cracked. I'd kept them out of guilt. 3 weeks after we broke up, Mallory disappeared. I'd forgotten how much it haunted me. There were rumors she ran away. Others said she'd been taken. Her mom blamed the internet. The police found no evidence of anything. But I remembered something no one else did. The night before she vanished, we talked on the phone. She told me her braces were coming off soon, and she was scared. Why, I'd ask. Her voice was shaky. Because I don't think the teeth underneath are mine anymore. I didn't sleep again that night. Instead, I lay on the couch, holding the old retainer case in my lap like a music box, staring at the teeth impressions, trying to remember her face, trying to remember if her smile had ever looked like mine. The next morning I had a voicemail. It was from Dr. Merrow. Her voice was calm, steady, but there was something urgent under the surface. Evan, this is Ellen. I don't have much time. You need to stop brushing. Immediately. You're reinforcing the bond. They respond to stimulation. You're making them more comfortable. Static crackled. She continued. You need to come back tonight, 11:45. Bring something of your own, something that's touched your blood. The message cut off there. No callback number. I checked my mouth. My gums had receded further. The top edges of the teeth were pristine, untouched, but the bottoms, the roots, were darkening, widening. The front left canine looked longer than the day before. I tapped it gently. It clicked, not against another tooth. It clicked on its own. Chapter 5, The Man in the Dental Chair. At 11:42 p.m., I stood outside the warehouse again, 3 minutes early. Same cold wind pushing through the empty alleyway, the same rustling paper caught in a drain grate. The brass door was cracked open, the hall behind it lit dimly by a single fluorescent bulb. This time I didn't hesitate. Inside, the waiting room was exactly as before. White tile, old leather chairs, the fish tank still bubbling, though the fish inside were gone. I heard the low hum of dental machinery from the back. Then footsteps. Dr. Merrow appeared in the doorway. She looked tired. Her high-collared coat was buttoned unevenly. Her hair was looser than usual, and her expression, what had once been calm and clinical, now bordered on concern. Not panic, but close. Thank you for coming. I held up the retainer case. You said to bring something of my own. She nodded. That's perfect. May I? I handed it over. She opened the case and inspected the trays, carefully running a gloved finger along the ridges. She sniffed once, quick, clinical, then looked up at me. These weren't molded for you. I know. They still carry a trace of her. I sat down, suddenly exhausted. Mallory, she disappeared. Dr. Merrow's eyes darkened. She was one of the first. She led me down a hallway I hadn't seen before. The tiles shifted to exposed concrete, the lights humming louder the deeper we went. At the end of the corridor was a heavy steel door. She unlocked it with a key that looked older than the building. Inside was a second examination room, but not like the one from before. No aquarium. No dental posters. No hand sanitizer pump. Just a single reclining chair and a set of worn cabinets bolted to the wall. In the centre of the room sat a man. Mid-40s, I guessed. Pale, thin, with damp, stringy hair that stuck to his forehead. His hands were tied loosely with medical gauze to the arms of the chair, not to restrain him, but to remind him where he was. His mouth was open, not gaping, just slightly ajar. Enough to reveal the rows of teeth inside, and there were more than there should have been. 2 complete rows, top and bottom, with extras in between, wedged into places no tooth had business fitting. Some were baby teeth, others yellowed like they belonged to the elderly, and a few looked exactly like mine. The man didn't blink when I entered. He just smiled. "Evan," he rasped. I stopped cold. Dr. Merrow glanced at me. "He's not dangerous. Not physically." "Who is he?" The man laughed, a dry, clicking sound that echoed in the sterile room. "I'm the reason you have such a lovely smile." I stared. Dr. Merrow stepped beside him. "This is Darren. He was part of a trial 10 years ago, a dental correction experiment involving somatic mapping and tissue anchoring, an attempt to rebuild dental symmetry without implants." She paused. "It worked, but not in the way we hoped." Darren grinned wider. "They liked me. They found me early." Merrow nodded. "Something latched on. A template, maybe. A collection of dental patterns. We don't know exactly what it is. But we've learned this. Once it takes root in someone's mouth, it needs more. Not nutrition, not blood." She turned to me. "It needs residency." I took a step back. "You're saying it's, what, a parasite?" She shook her head. "Not in the traditional sense, more like an imprint, a library of smiles. They migrate, they embed themselves in hosts with specific vulnerabilities, those with emotional trauma, fractured identity, or dental injury." I sat in the chair opposite Darren, still staring. "So these teeth," she nodded, "they're not yours. Not entire. Some belong to Mallory, some to Darren, some to others we've lost. The pattern doesn't erase the host. It layers over them. You still have a few of your own. For now." Darren leaned forward slightly. The gauze creaked. "I had perfect teeth once," he whispered. "Not anymore. Now I have everyone's." I turned to Merrow. "Why me?" She looked away. "You were on my list. A long time ago. Your name was flagged after a childhood injury. You should have been screened before your adult molars erupted, but the program ended." "Why?" "Because it became clear we weren't fixing teeth. We were spreading them." She handed me a small tray of instruments. One was a dental pick, another looked like a thin file, and one was a mirror. "You said they respond to stimulation," I said. She nodded. "That's how they anchor. Brushing, chewing, smiling. Every time you treat them like yours, they embed deeper." "Can I remove them?" "Not all, but we can start with the bicuspid, the one that clicked." She reached for my jaw, steady and calm. "Whatever happens," she said, "don't bite down." The pain wasn't sharp, it was pressure. She worked gently, using the file to loosen the root. I could feel it resisting, not with pain, but with tension, like pulling a plug from soft clay. Then pop, I gasped. In the mirror I saw the tooth. It wasn't normal. The root was forked, longer than it should have been, and covered in something thin and dark like moss. She dropped it into a tray. The air in the room shifted. Darren stiffened. Then his mouth opened wider, so wide I heard his jaw creak, and from somewhere deep in his throat came a moan. A low, guttural sound of loss. Merrow looked at the mirror. One down. Later, when I got home, I opened the freezer and saw something I hadn't noticed before. A glass jar. Inside it were 3 teeth, floating in clear fluid. One of them had a ridge I recognized. It looked exactly like the one I'd lost this morning, except I hadn't brought it home. Chapter 6, The Library of Faces. There are things you can explain away. You lose time, must be stress. You find something misplaced, probably just forgot. You wake up with a tooth in your freezer, no explanation, but you tell yourself it's better not to have one. But memory? Memory is supposed to be yours. And when that starts to shift, you realize the invasion began a long time ago. I stared at the jar in the freezer until the cold numbed my eyes. 3 teeth floated in the clear solution like fossils trapped in ice. One was small and ridged. One was jagged, cracked down the middle. The third was darker, almost grey, and too flat to be mine. But I recognized it. Not as my own, but from a dream. 2 weeks ago, maybe 3, I'd woken with the taste of chalk and a dull ache in my cheek. I'd dreamed I was chewing, again, and one of the teeth I spit out in the dream had that same flat shape. I thought it was just my subconscious working through everything. Now I wasn't sure. Now I didn't know if it had been a dream at all. I called Dr. Merrow the next morning. No answer. I tried the number I'd used the first time I found her flyer. Disconnected. Her voicemail was still on my phone. I played it 3 times. "Bring something of your own," she'd said. "Something that's touched your blood." The retainer, Mallory's. That's what I'd brought. But I'd never brought anything of mine. So I started looking. A toothbrush worn down to the bristles. An old mouthguard from when I briefly tried boxing in college. A handkerchief with a blood stain from a nosebleed last year. Even a loose baby tooth my mom had returned to me in a small envelope labelled Kindergarten, First Lost. I gathered them all and laid them out on the kitchen table. And then, without knowing why, I brought out a photo album. I hadn't looked at the pictures in years. There was one from a summer picnic, age 7, missing my front tooth. I remembered how loose it had felt for days, hanging by a thread, until I finally pulled it out with a paper towel. I remembered the taste of blood, metallic, warm, my own. Then I turned the page and stopped. There was a picture I didn't remember, a school photo, 4th grade, I think, but my smile was wrong. Too wide, too many teeth, and they were all straight. That couldn't be right. I hadn't gotten braces until 2 years after. I flipped to the next page. High school, homecoming photo. I'm smiling with a girl I barely remember. But again, the teeth, the angle, the shape, not mine. In the margin, written in my mom's handwriting, "Look at that perfect smile." My hand shook. If those weren't my teeth, then whose were they? That night I had the dream again. Not the chewing one, something worse. I was in a hallway of mirrors, but each reflection showed a different version of me. One had braces, one had gold crowns, one had no teeth at all. And one, far at the end, was smiling in a way that made my skin crawl. Not because it was monstrous, because it was familiar. Because it was Mallory's. I woke up with blood in my mouth. At 3:45 a.m. I stood in the bathroom mirror with a flashlight and checked every tooth, every crevice. Nothing loose, nothing bleeding. Until I looked closer at my right incisor. The gum line had pulled back again. Not much, but just enough to show something odd. A tiny groove, like a carving. I used my phone to zoom in. It was faint, could have been a trick of the light, but it looked like letters. Just 2. Mallory Green. I returned to the warehouse later that day. Merrow's office was gone, completely empty. No chair, no fish tank, no gauze. The frosted glass was now shattered, the frame taped over with brown paper. A sign had been hung on the door. For lease, by appointment only. I called the number. Disconnected. I stood there for a long time, staring at the cracked tile floor, wondering how much of what I'd seen had ever been real. At home, I made a choice. I took the tooth I'd removed, the one Merrow had pulled, and I brought it to a local oral pathologist. Said I found it in a thrift store box of keepsakes. Asked if they could tell me anything. The woman behind the counter looked skeptical, but agreed. She called 3 days later. "You said you found this?" "Yes." "Well, that's a bit concerning." "Why, it's definitely human, adult male, but the tissue on the root, what's left of it, is still viable." "Still alive?" "In a manner of speaking. It means it was removed recently." I said nothing. "There's something else," she said. "There's DNA from 2 people." "What?" "One matches the tooth itself, the host, but the second is external, cellular residue from a second person, genetically distinct." "What does that mean?" "Well," she hesitated, "it means someone else's cells were present in the root canal at the time of removal, infiltrating the nerve space. That shouldn't be possible unless... Unless what? Unless the tooth was hosting them." I didn't sleep that night, not even a little. I brushed my teeth at midnight, carefully, mechanically, out of habit. Then I spit. Not blood, not toothpaste, but something small, soft. I reached into the sink and picked it up. It was a photograph, no larger than a postage stamp. Water warped, folded tight, a girl in braces, Mallory, smiling. Chapter 7. The Tooth Collector. The photo from the sink didn't make sense. It was too small, too detailed, and somehow completely dry despite coming out of a pool of water and foam. But it was her. Mallory Green, age maybe 15, braces reflecting light. Same crooked front teeth, I remembered. Same deep-set eyes that never looked quite directly at the camera. I turned the photo over. No message, no date. Just a faint impression like it had been pressed between something else for a long time. Faint ridges, almost like teeth marks. I spent the next day calling around. Mallory's parents had moved, that much I knew. They'd left town a year after her disappearance. I couldn't remember her mother's first name, but I found a newspaper article archived online, a short blurb from 2010 mentioning a candlelight vigil. The quote was attributed to Sandra Green. I found her listed under a post office box in the next county over. No phone number, just a mailing address. So I wrote her a letter. I didn't mention teeth, just said I'd been a friend of Mallory's and something about her had recently resurfaced in my life. I asked if Sandra might be willing to speak, off the record, off the books, just for clarity. Closure, maybe. I didn't expect a response. But 4 days later, I got one. A note on unlined paper, folded tightly and slid into a plain white envelope. Inside was a single line, written in sharp, deliberate cursive. If they found you again, don't smile. No return address. No signature. I drove out to the address listed on the P.O. box anyway. A half-abandoned mobile park on a hillside, half the trailers dark and caved in. The mailbox was jammed open with junk circulars. There was no Sandra Green, no Mallory. But in the parking lot sat a rusting minivan, its back bumper covered in faded stickers. Proud band mom, my child is an honour student, and one small square with a tooth on it. Not a cartoon one, not a dental office sticker. A black molar silhouette with a tiny white cross on the crown. I didn't recognise it, but I'd seen that tooth before, in my own mouth. I drove home the long way, back roads, a station coffee, a stop at a strip mall to stare blankly at strangers. I watched people smile, at cashiers, at children, at nothing, and suddenly every grin felt dangerous. I didn't know what was real anymore, which teeth belonged to the people wearing them, and which didn't. That night I left my phone recording in the bathroom. I brushed, I flossed, I left the light on and went to bed. At 3:14 a.m. I woke up to silence, not unusual. Until I checked the phone. The recording was 4 hours long. I scrubbed through it, looking for noise, pipes, creaks, anything. And then, just after 2:20 a.m., something faint. A whisper. Not loud, not clear, just breath and a few syllables. I turned up the volume, rewind. A whisper, just behind the mic, smile wider. I didn't go back to sleep. Instead, I opened a file folder I hadn't touched in over a decade. Old dental records, cleanings, bite wings, orthodontic evaluations from childhood, a note from a dentist named Feldman recommending braces I never got, then a record I didn't remember at all. April 2004. Referral, Holloway Correctional Dental Program. I stared at the page. I was 10 years old in 2004. There was no memory of that appointment, but I recognized the referral stamp. It was the same name I'd seen on the side of Merrow's building. I looked up the old Holloway facility again, formerly a prison dental unit, closed down years ago, absorbed by some private contractor and buried under confidentiality agreements. But one thing stood out. The last listed staff dentist on public record. I returned to the building the next day. Not the former dental office, but the service entrance in the alley behind it. The one marked with the Holloway insignia. This time the door wasn't locked. It groaned open to reveal a stairwell leading down. Concrete walls, no lights, just a faint chemical odour, bleach, dust, and something older. I followed the stairs with my phone flashlight. The beam trembled in my hand. At the bottom was a long, narrow corridor. Metal shelves lined the walls, filled with old file boxes, some labelled by hand, others marked with typed labels. Extractions. 2003, bicuspids, lateral study. Conversion patterns, phase 4. I opened one at random. Inside were teeth, bagged, labelled, tagged with names I didn't recognise, but one caught my eye. A clear pouch with a familiar curve. I held it up to the flashlight. Name, Green M. Date, notes. Replaced, see file 719 ERM. I dropped it. In the very back of the corridor was a room marked only Archive. It was locked, but not securely. I used a flathead key from my car to pop it open. Inside were more boxes, but these weren't records. They were photo albums, hundreds of them, all labelled the same way, smiles, one per year. Going back decades, I opened one. Page after page of headshots, school photos, DMV pictures, candid party shots, and every one was the same. Not the same face, not the same person, but the same smile. Identical teeth, same curve, same spacing, same perfect line. And on the inside cover of each album, a note. Archived and redistributed for permanent residency. Confirmed compatibility. I took photos, as many as I could. Then I left, quietly, without looking back. As I climbed the stairs, I felt my jaw tighten. Not from fear, from resistance. Something behind my teeth pulling backward as if to say, don't leave. I kept walking. At home, I looked at myself in the mirror, and I forced myself to do it, to smile. I stared at my teeth for a long time. Then I took the retainer case, Mallory's, and slid in the top tray. It didn't fit perfectly, but one tooth, one single tooth, clicked into place like it had never left. And I heard a sound in the bathroom behind me, a low hum, like a dental drill warming up. But I live alone, and the power was out. Chapter 8, Residency Confirmed. I didn't tell anyone about the albums, not because I was afraid they wouldn't believe me, but because deep down I was afraid they would. There was something about those pages, those grinning faces, that carbon copy smile, that made me feel complicit. Like I had flipped through a yearbook of the damned and found my own face on every page. And I think I knew, if I told someone, it would mean acknowledging I wasn't just a victim. I was a carrier. The humming in the bathroom stopped when I turned the lights back on. I checked every corner, every vent, every outlet. Nothing. Just the mirror, my toothbrush, and the faint echo of my own breath. But the retainer tray I'd fitted, Mallory's, was gone. I don't mean I dropped it or misplaced it. I mean it had vanished. I hadn't removed it. I hadn't set it down. It was just gone. And when I looked in the mirror again, my smile was different. Not dramatically, not to someone else. But I knew the tilt of my canines, the way my front incisors usually overlapped slightly. And now, perfect, symmetrical. Resolved. Like the last piece had clicked into place. I called in sick again. Karen didn't even sound surprised this time. You okay? She asked. Not because she cared, but because I'd crossed the line from functioning employee to potential liability. I think I'm being followed, I said. There was a pause. Then, well, that's not good. I started watching people on the street. Specifically, their teeth. The guy handing out flyers near the subway entrance. His smile was crooked, imperfect, real. The woman behind the counter at the deli, straight teeth, capped molars. But they moved when she laughed. They belonged to her. And then there was the man in the trench coat standing on the corner of 14th and Mercer. He never spoke, just stood with his hands in his pockets. He looked up once, just once, and I saw his teeth, identical to mine. I approached cautiously, my heart punching against my ribs. Hey, he didn't move. I stepped closer. Do I know you? He looked up again. Then very slowly smiled. I don't remember what happened next. I remember blinking. And then he was gone. Not across the street. Not ducking into a store. Just gone. But something was in my hand. A slip of paper. On it, printed in the same font from the original dental flyer. Merrow Dental. Every smile tells a story. Let yours be beautiful. Final appointment confirmed. Room 717 residency review. I didn't know what room 717 meant. It wasn't in the warehouse. I Googled it. One result. A long-closed hotel downtown, the kind with boarded-up windows and fake ivy rotting on the stone facade. Most of the floors had been condemned after a fire in 2006. Room 717 was on the 7th floor. I drove there that night. Inside, the hotel lobby smelled like mold and air freshener trying to strangle each other. The chandelier had been replaced by a bare bulb. The elevator didn't work. I climbed the stairs, counting each floor. By the 5th, my legs burned. By the 6th, I started hearing something. Whispering. Not in a language I recognized. Not even words, really. Just teethy syllables. Clicking. Licking. Like a mouth rehearsing language it never learned. Room 717 was at the end of the hallway. The door wasn't locked. Inside, the room had been stripped bare. No bed. No light fixture. Just a single examination chair in the centre, the kind you'd see in an old dental office, padded, cracked, reclined slightly, and beside it a tray of tools. Waiting. There was a note taped to the wall, handwritten, "Sit, don't speak, we are listening." I should have left, but I didn't. I sat down. The door creaked shut behind me, though no one entered, and slowly a soft pressure began building in my mouth. Not pain. Presence. Like something testing the walls of my skull, something counting. I don't know how long I sat there. 10 minutes? An hour? Eventually, the overhead light flickered on, and standing in the corner of the room was Mallory, or someone wearing her. She was older, thinner, hair longer and brittle like it had never been cut right, but the braces were gone, and the smile? Mine. "I didn't know it would take this long," she said softly. "Mallory?" She nodded. "That's the name they used when they wore me, before I passed it on." "What is this?" She stepped closer, voice almost kind. "Residency isn't about ownership. It's about survival. These aren't just teeth. They're history, memory, identity. Why me? Because your mouth is perfect, and you don't remember." "Don't remember what?" She leaned forward until her face was inches from mine. "The first time you smiled wasn't yours." I blinked, and she was gone. The room was dark again. But on the tray beside me was a small black card. One word printed on it in silver ink. Approved. I woke up in my bed. No memory of driving home. No card in my pocket. But something was under my pillow. Another tooth. Except this one wasn't whole. It had been carved into the shape of a tiny key. Chapter 9. The First Smile. The key was small enough to lose if I blinked wrong. Barely larger than a thumbnail. Smooth in some places, jagged in others. Definitely bone. Porous and faintly yellow, like it had spent years inside a jaw before being carved down into this. And yet when I held it, I felt it fit. Like a puzzle piece in the palm of my hand. Not to anything physical, but to something in me. I didn't go to work. I didn't call. The walls of my apartment felt smaller now, like they were leaning in, breath held, waiting. I placed the key on the kitchen table and sat across from it like it might move if I turned away. For the first time in weeks, I didn't touch my toothbrush, didn't rinse, didn't even sip water. Somewhere in the back of my gums, I felt the weight of stillness, like they were listening. I started going through old boxes, childhood things, birthday cards, school binders. Eventually, in a small plastic tub labelled Evan K5, I found something strange. A sheet of Polaroids, 4 total. Me at different ages, age 6, age 8, age 9 and 10. Each one I was smiling, but the smiles were all the same. Identical, not just similar. Identical. Same teeth, same tilt, same open-mouthed grin. Even though my actual teeth changed through those years, baby teeth falling out, adult ones growing in, these photos showed no change at all. And worse, each photo had a faint line under the chin. A fold, like someone had trimmed a face out of another photo and glued it over mine. I flipped them over. On the back, written in pencil, proof of early compatibility, residency initiated. I called my mother. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hi, honey." "Mom, I need to ask something." "Of course." "Do you remember taking pictures of me when I was a kid? School photos, birthday stuff?" She hesitated. "Well, sure. I remember a few." "Why?" "Do you remember my smile?" Silence. Then, "You always had such nice teeth, Evan. You were lucky. Never needed braces like the other kids. People used to say you had a smile like a movie star." I gripped the phone tighter. "When did they start saying that?" "Oh," she sighed thoughtfully. "I don't know. Maybe after that dental thing when you were 10. "What dental thing?" "That correctional program. They did free cleanings for kids. You were selected at school. I filled out a form. You were only gone for a few hours." I swallowed. "Where did they take me?" "I don't know. Some kind of mobile clinic. A bus, maybe. They said you were a perfect candidate." "For what?" Another pause. Then, quietly, "For the catalogue." That night, I used the key. Not in a lock. Not on a door. But on a drawer I hadn't been able to open since I moved into the apartment. It was built into the hallway, an old warped wood unit set beneath a medicine cabinet that hadn't closed properly since I moved in. I'd tried everything before, tools, pry bars, WD-40. This time I slipped the tooth key into a small notch I hadn't noticed before. It clicked. The drawer slid open. Inside Wrapped in wax paper were 5 items. 1, a small glass jar containing 2 extracted teeth, one with a gold crown. 2, a Polaroid photo of me as a teenager, but with someone else's eyes. 3, a faded appointment card from Merrow Dental, room 717. 4, a strip of gauze stained faintly pink. 5, and a voice recorder. I pressed play. The recording started with silence, then static, then my own voice. Residency confirmed. Host is unaware. Transfer stable. Then Dr. Merrow's voice, crisp, professional. Noted. When did the subject lose primary identity recall? Between ages 9 and 10. First extraction successful. He didn't notice. Perfect. Keep smiling, Evan. They like that. The tape clicked off. I dropped the recorder. Something inside me recoiled, not from fear, but from recognition. Like hearing a home movie you forgot you filmed. The memory came slowly, like a shadow surfacing through fog. Me in a mobile dental van. A warm-smelling chair. A gentle voice saying just a small pinch. Then pressure, crunch, and afterwards something else. A mirror. A stranger's smile staring back at me, and me saying, "That's not mine." And someone, maybe Merrow, gently replying, "It is now." I walked to the mirror. Not the bathroom. The hallway mirror. The one with the crack along the bottom edge. I stood there, breathing evenly. Then I smiled, not out of habit, not for comfort, not as a reflex. I forced it. The teeth gleamed. Smooth. Too straight, too white, as if they'd never belonged in a human mouth. And as I watched, I felt one begin to wobble. Not fall, not break, but loosen, like something had stopped holding on, like the contract was ending. Then I heard the doorbell. I froze. It was 1:12 a.m. I opened the door. No one there. But on the welcome mat, a folder. Inside a note, handwritten. Phase X, return of original smile. And at the bottom, stamped in black, next appointment, tonight. Below the gums. Chapter 10, Below the Gums. The phrase kept echoing, below the gums. Not a location, a direction. I didn't sleep, didn't shower, didn't brush my teeth. Instead, I stood at the bathroom mirror and stared at my reflection. For hours, I kept smiling, then dropping the smile, then doing it again, testing it, stretching it, watching for something to fail. And just after 5 a.m., one of them did. Front incisor, right side. It shifted, not down, but back, as if it had been pulled by a string into the roof of my mouth. There was no blood, no pain, only a sound, a soft wet click, like a lock disengaging behind my eyes. I opened my mouth wider and saw it, a seam, running horizontally along the upper gum line. Not scar tissue, a hidden line, pale grey, thin as dental floss, curved like a smile. A door. I didn't know what to do. I only knew what I had to do. I called no one. I left no note. I took the tooth key, the folder, the voice recorder. And I returned to the warehouse building, Merrow's building, the one that had swallowed her, then me, then everything. It was still vacant, still boarded up. But the back entrance, the old service stairwell, was open again. This time it didn't lead down. It led in. Past the stairwell was a hallway I'd never seen. It curved, downward, almost imperceptibly, and the air changed, no longer stale, now humid, moist and metallic, like the inside of a mouth. I followed it step by step until I reached a second door, no handle, just a mirror, etched into the glass, barely visible. Authorized hosts only. I opened my mouth and smiled. The seam above my gum line split wide. Inside something bloomed, a light, a feeling, like memory, but not mine, and the mirror opened. Beyond the mirror wasn't a room, it was a tunnel, lined in pale, pulsing walls, soft hums, clicks, the distant sound of dental tools, but slower, deeper, like whales calling from miles below. The tunnel narrowed until I had to crawl. At some point I began to see them, teeth, embedded in the walls, thousands, maybe millions, some intact, some cracked, all different shapes, ages, shades. Some were child-sized. Some were fused together, canines touching molars as if grown that way. And some had names carved into them. Eagerly. Mine. At the end of the tunnel I found the chair. Not like before. No vinyl. No headrest. This one was bone, ivory white, carved, polished by what I can only assume were years of people sitting, waiting, smiling. Beside it, another mirror. But this one didn't reflect me. It reflected everyone I had ever been, every version, Every borrowed smile, Mallory, Darren, the boy from the Polaroid, the man in the trench coat, all of them, flickering across my face, not layered, stacked. I sat in the chair, a voice whispered behind me, gentle, female, familiar. Dr. Merrow. You've carried them well, Evan. What happens now? You return what you borrowed. And then? Then you decide who you want to be. A drill lowered from above, silent, not mechanical, something more aware. I didn't flinch. It hovered above my open mouth, and the extra teeth, the perfect ones, the ones too white, too still, they began to rise, one by one, like they were leaving of their own accord, as if finally they were done with me. The last to leave was the incisor, the first to shift. As it rose, something came with it. Not blood, not bone. A name, not spoken, remembered. Evan Matthew Greeley. The name I hadn't thought about in years. Not since they first took my smile. Not since they made me forget who I was, who I used to be, before the catalogue, the retainer, the residency. I woke up on the floor of my apartment. The tooth key was gone. So was the folder. The drawer was sealed again, flush with the wood. I stood slowly and walked to the mirror. Opened my mouth. My teeth were crooked, a little yellowed, a bit crowded. My smile was mine, imperfect, human. The next day I returned to the deli on Mercer. The woman behind the counter greeted me like always. She smiled. Her teeth were off-center. One molar had a silver cap, and for the first time in weeks I smiled back. Not because I had to, because I could, and because the man in the trench coat, he was nowhere to be seen. Later I received one last thing, an envelope, no stamp, inside a Polaroid, me standing in front of the deli, smiling. The caption scrawled on the back, host released. Identity restored. Smile responsibly. And so Evan smiled one last time. Not because it was beautiful, not because it was perfect, but because, finally, the borrowed teeth are gone. The mirror is silent. And in that silence, maybe, you'll start to wonder about your own smile. Does it feel natural, or does it feel like something that moved in while you weren't paying attention? Thank you for listening to My Teeth Are Perfect, but None of Them Are Mine. If you're still awake, turn slowly toward your mirror. And if you're already asleep, don't worry. They only come for the ones who smile.